Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. John Keir with you today, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Hello.
Today, Austin, we're talking about the big news in sports, which is no news, because there's nothing going on. As we all know by this point, the last couple weeks, COVID-19, this new strain of coronavirus, which started in China, has now spread across the world, the World Health Organization declaring it a pandemic, and it feels like the whole world is shutting down, and that includes, of course, sports in this country and around the world, and I don't even know where to begin with this. It's just, there's nothing going on. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy out here with all of the things shutting down and stuff. Obviously, our state that we live in is the most affected at the moment out of the United States. So it's been a little bit different here, and I'm a little bit closer to the city where most of like the, I forget what they put in place. I don't think they put the shelter in place yet, but there's Humvees. I think they're starting martial law because the Humvees and tanks are rolling through like it's some like war zone. But other than that, like it's just weird on a day-to-day basis. I work in a grocery store. It's a little wild out there. People are a little crazy.
Yeah, so people have been shopping kind of endlessly for things like toilet paper the last few weeks. But you and I are considered essential right now because that's kind of how it's gone in this state, is that they've shut down basically, I think starting tomorrow, today being March 22nd, I think it was something like they were shutting down everything that's considered non-essential starting tomorrow.
Yeah, I think so. I know that today, all hairdressers and stuff had to be closed, like barbers, hairdressers, and nail salons had to be closed by today, and then tomorrow, like the next wave of things has to be closed. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of things closed, and like you said, we're essential. The post office and grocery stores are deemed essential. Don't worry, kids. The liquor store is deemed essential as well, which I find hilarious.
That's interesting because I know in Pennsylvania it's a little different. Like they call them state stores, and I know that they've been shut down. So I heard that a lot of places that were still open, like restaurants, I don't know how that's going to work. I guess they're probably not considered essential, are they?
Restaurants are, but you can only do takeout still.
Okay, so that's going to continue then.
If a restaurant can't do takeout, they have to shut down, but I'm sure like restaurants will figure it out.
Okay, yeah, that's how it's been lately. Man, it's just this new reality that we're adjusting to, and obviously, this is not this is not a typical talk show when it comes to what's going on around the world, but when events impact sports in the way they have, I mean, we have never seen anything quite like this where entire seasons have been stopped like this. The NBA and NHL seasons come to a screeching halt. The MLB season, which had been ramping up, getting ready to start, it would start in about a week from today, give or take. They delayed their start, and like you mentioned, there's a ton of measures being taken to increase social distancing, making sure there are less people around. I got to be honest with you, I just had a close call myself at a grocery store out in my area, and I have to think that the worst place to be, because the World Health Organization has advised against gatherings of 10 plus people, I'd have to think the worst place to be is a grocery store, because that's where you're having a ton of people congregating, and that's just insane to me. I sent you that Snapchat yesterday of all those people in that parking lot, right?
There's tons of people at that Wegmans you were at, yeah.
That's insane. I don't know. Like, that's scary to me.
And people are freaking out, so they're all gathering, getting their stuff, because that's the same here. It's the same at the grocery stores here. People line up. I haven't worked at 6 a.m., but we have special things in place for old people so that old people can shop from 6 to 7:30 a.m. before the stores actually open. And there's lines outside the store at 5:30 a.m. for people to come in. And I don't live in like the most populated area. I mean, it's still popular, but like the lines are ridiculous at 5:30 a.m. for just old people.
And obviously, this is going on just about everywhere. And as it relates to sports, I just mentioned, we've never seen things get suspended like this. So the NFL, NHL, and NBA seasons come to a halt. Their best chances for potentially finishing the season lie whenever this is, I guess, over the hill. And we're certainly closer to the start of that than we are the end of it at this point. So a lot of uncertainty as to when those seasons are going to end, and if they're going to have to be canceled entirely, or when the Major League Baseball season is going to start. One sport that seems to be okay at the moment is the National Football League. They may have gotten lucky, and obviously we don't know what's going to happen, how long this is going to take, but it's possible that the NFL may only have one major event impacted, and that's the NFL draft, which they're not going to have. They're not going to have anybody attending the event now. It was supposed to be in Las Vegas, but now it's just going to be done the old-fashioned way via phone and notepad these days, I guess.
I guess so. It's going to be interesting to see what they actually choose to do. I mean, hey, maybe by next month it'll be all better, and it's kind of a long shot. It's being hopeful, but yeah, right now it doesn't seem like it's going to be like anything like normal. It'll be like old days.
So I guess my question to you, and kind of a question at large, is should they consider pushing the draft back? Because we just had this huge free agency frenzy, and we'll get to a lot of what happened in the NFL free agency here in a minute, which, by the way, was really nice to see because it was something when we've had nothing for over a week now. It felt like we were all starved for something sports-related. So that was pretty cool. But I guess the reason I'm wondering is once the NFL draft happens, that's it until whenever this ends. So might it be a smart idea to try to push things back since teams are already not going to be able to prepare with these draft picks most likely right after the draft?
I have personal reasons to want it to be pushed back, and I also agree that it should be pushed back to try and return to normalcy and have like a normal draft. I don't think it will be, but I am for it. I feel like teams should be able to meet with players, and if it takes time to get better from the virus and stuff, so that teams can meet, I think that would be a good thing overall. I mean, I know I texted you yesterday, like I was saying that team meeting with a player could be detrimental. Like take for example Darius Geis when he fought like the whole Eagles front office when he went there, which was a hilarious story. Like that was not a good meeting, and that probably hurt his stuff. But I'm sure there are some meetings that are really going to send it over the edge. And what comes to mind is Deontay Johnson. I remember how the Steelers fell in love with him after they met him. Late Darryl Drake really, really liked Deontay Johnson after speaking to him, and then he said, please go get Deontay Johnson. That's the thing on the other side. So I think overall, people should be able to meet with the players. I do think it should be pushed back. And then for personal reasons, I would love the extra time to be able to look at more prospects, to be able to really make sure that, hey, everyone that the Steelers draft, we're going to have covered, and maybe some extras, maybe some guys that go to the AFC North, or some guys that just stay in the AFC, some guys that we want to keep up with. I would love it for that reason too, but it doesn't sound like they have any intention of pushing it back. What do you think? Do you think they should push it back?
It's obviously a liquid situation, so it could possibly change, but because it's not anything that's physically taking place, they don't necessarily need to. I just think that it'll draw more the attention of more people if they do push it back a little bit. And obviously, people being quarantined, social distancing, they need to find things to do. You and I can do this for quite a while if we have the time. I mean, we could look at a ton more. I mean, we generally look at over 100 prospects every year. We could double that, and we still wouldn't have looked at every player that ends up getting drafted. So we could be at this for a while if we needed to be. I'm sure we could keep ourselves busy. So I certainly wouldn't mind it, just because it's nice to get a bigger picture of what's going on. But I think it would be a smarter business measure, just because the NFL does have the spotlight right now. And like I said, once that's over with, you conclude the draft in late April. If this thing goes on till July, August, like they're saying it could, or perhaps even longer, what are we going to have until then? Nothing. So I don't know. That's just something I think that they should at least think about. But right now they're not. But as we know, this is a very fluid situation, so things could change.
Of course. Yeah. I hope it does change in the future.
Any closing thoughts on COVID-19 as it relates to sports at this time, or just in general?
Oh,
Is there anything else still going on? I know NASCAR's doing their iRacing thing, which is, I mean, you can make jokes about it if you want, but it's like the only thing that's going on. I mean, isn't there UFC and WWE? I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
I think UFC canceled its stuff until April. Their next 3 big fights until late April. I don't know about the WWE.
I know that the WWE was still on. The last I heard, UFC was as well. I'm reading an article on ESPN right now. WrestleMania is still on, but it's going to be held at their training facility with no fans. So it looks like that, the iRacing thing for NASCAR, UFC postponed its next 3 events. So yeah, it's pretty much just esports and WWE. So this is what it's come to, my friend.
Let's sim the first few games of the MLB season on MLB The Show. I think that sounds fun.
Hey, I mean, baseball is not good. I don't think they'd lose a ton by. I mean, I think that let's be honest. The NFL's, we were talking about this before. The NFL's the only league that's expanded its season. Meanwhile, all the other leagues, the major leagues, I feel like should decrease the amount of games they're playing per season. In baseball, I've always said this is my biggest pet peeve about the entire sport. Besides the different rules for the different leagues, I don't know. Do you know anything about that, Austin?
Yeah, I know. I don't ask me what the conferences are in that, but I do know that in one that the pitcher doesn't hit, and one in the pitcher does actually step up to the plate.
So
that's really frustrating.
It's the whole designated hitter thing. Yeah, that's my biggest pet peeve about baseball. And then the second one would have to be that you play 162 games and you don't play every other team in the league. That's my other big pet peeve.
I'm sorry. Wait, what?
So there are 30 teams in baseball. In a given season, you play, let's see, you play 20 of the 30 teams. 20 of the other 29 teams, because you're not going to play yourself. You don't play all 30 teams or other 29 teams in the league.
Really, I didn't know that. I thought they played every team. I honestly didn't know that.
No, but you see why that would bother me.
That's really frustrating because I don't understand the reason for that.
So the way it works is, hold on. The way it works is there are 6 divisions with 5 teams each, and each obviously there's the American and National League. You play obviously if you're in one league, you'll play every team in that league, plus you'll play one other division. So it's kind of like the way the NFL does it, where you're playing across the conference. You play one division in the opposite conference, but it's like that in baseball too. So like you'll play every team from the opposite league's East Division, but you won't play any other division unless you get to the World Series. And you play, again, 162 games. So that's a big pet peeve of mine. So if you're cutting out games on top of the fact that there's already too many, I think that just makes more sense, because I don't know. I always thought there was too many games, but there's especially too many if you're not going to be playing every team. Just something I'm getting on my pedestal about.
That's super stupid. I agree.
Anyhow, enough of that. Let's get back into football talk. Anything you want to open up with right now before we get into the moves that were made regarding running backs?
No, I don't have any opening thoughts. I mean, I was about to talk about a move, but yeah, no, you could take it.
So you're talking about, you want to start with the changes made at fullback?
Yeah.
All right, let's go for it.
I was going to be sad.
Let's go for it.
All right, so the Steelers opted to sign Derek Watt, and in signing Derek Watt, Roosevelt Nix asked for his release. I'm a little confused on the timeline of that. Apparently, he asked for his release as soon as Derek Watt was signed, and not before. But that's up to that's up to interpretation. But I was really sad. I was really hoping to keep 2 fullbacks on the roster because I found that to be dope. 2 really good special teams fullbacks at that as well. But especially with the extra roster space now and more game day actives. So, I mean, it's sad to see Roosevelt Nix go. I hope he finds a team. I was really hoping the Steelers could trade him, but I think they did what was best for him. He wanted to be released. He wanted to choose his team. I think that overall for him, I'm happy that he gets what he wants instead of being traded somewhere he wouldn't want to go. But, yeah, now we got Derek Watt. Derek Watt's lit. We have 2 of the Watt brothers now, and we just need the third. We either need the third Edmonds or the third Watt. And then we'll complete the trifecta for one of those. But, yeah, it's still sad to see Rosie Nix go. But Derek Watt is quite the addition. He's a great special teams player. He's a great blocker on offense. He has some pass-catching abilities on offense. Not quite like Kyle Juszczyk, but probably better than Rosie Nix, even though Rosie Nix catching that touchdown against the Ravens was incredible. But overall, sad for Roosevelt Nix, but having the second one is pretty cool.
If you prefer duos, you could always get Mike Pouncey too, and then you could have 3 duos.
True. then we'll have the trifecta of duos.
So it seems to me that the big issue here, I think there's 2 big reasons that you make this signing and subsequent cutting of Nix. Number 1 is the injury to Nix's knee last year. I think might have been either more serious or more of a problem for the team where they didn't like that he was not available. So I think that they were looking to move on from that standpoint. And I've heard this idea floated around. I'm not a big believer in it, but I do think that it's kind of a secondary thing that does matter a little bit, is that with TJ Watt's contract coming up for renewal at the end of this upcoming season, because he'll have 1 more year left on the 5th-year option, he'll be eligible for an extension, at least with the way the Steelers operate, is that having his brother on the team will help a little bit when it comes to wanting to keep him around. I don't know if you buy into that at all.
I don't see it as one of the reasons the team signed Derek Watt, but I do see it as something that will help with that in the future. I don't think it was considered, though.
No, I just think it was
I don't think that's why you're going to get Derek Watt.
It's just a nice perk.
Yeah, exactly. Just like extra.
So, now it is important to note that Watt is going to be making, 3 times what Nix was making?
Something like that, yeah.
And you talk about, so you're basically replacing Nix with someone that's probably a little bit better in most areas. He led the NFL in special teams tackles, but in cutting Nix, you've now lost 3 solid special teams players in Anthony Chicklow, whom the Steelers cut, Tyler Matakevich, who signed with the Buffalo Bills, and now Nix. So while you've added a really good special teams player in Derek Watt, you've still lost 3. So as much as I'd have loved to see 2 fullbacks, you've lost 3 special teams players, and you've only added 1 back. So that's something that's going to be a little concerning for now. But I'm still happy with the signing. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. I think it's a solid move.
It tells me that I think that the Steelers have a lot more faith in Spillane and Ulysses Gilbert before he was injured than we thought. I really liked Spillane coming in on special teams and doing well. And Gilbert was doing really well on special teams before he got hurt. So that's what I think it tells me. I think they're like, we're okay here. We're okay. Our special teams, once we get healthy, is going to be decent.
And it can always be better if you go out and get Sutton Smith back.
True, you could get Sutton Smith.
There's a name. I saw that name, and I was just, I forgot about just the euphoria around him when he was first drafted, and then he ended up not even making the team.
Yeah, went to the Bengals, got cut, and now I think he's with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was with 3 teams last year.
Oh yeah, I think he flirted with the Patriots for a week.
He was on the Jaguars for a week. I know that, and he was also on the Steelers practice squad twice for a combined 7 days.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's just hanging around, just going around trying to find a spot.
All right. So besides the whole fullback changes, what's going on with the rest of the running back room? Most of the names: James Conner, Benny Snell, Jalen Samuels. Those were the key guys last year. Kareth White came on late. Trey Edmonds was a depth piece. And then you've got the futures guys in Darren Hall, Ralph Webb. That's the running back room at this point. So let's talk a little bit about this room. Basically just a group that did not produce nearly enough last year. But again, what was there, like 6 or 7 players when you include Tony Brooks-James that carried the rock at some point last year? I don't know how you can expect consistency when you're having that many guys play. So this is a banged-up group that just didn't get the job done last year, even if it wasn't all their fault.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough from all of them. I mean, James Conner was hurt for too much. Benny Snell didn't really get going. I mean, he flashed at times, but other than that, Jalen Samuels had a disappointing year. I felt like Kareth White showed promise. I feel like Kareth White is one of the running backs I'm most excited for going into this year. I felt like he wasn't utilized enough once he was signed off the Bears practice squad. But I think he could be interesting. Trey Edmonds is a solid special teams running back. I think that he could be a guy that we see put onto the practice squad as one of the veterans that you can put on there. Actually, he might be practice squad eligible still. I don't know. But regardless, he's a guy that I think is good to be called up. I don't think he's should be on the roster, but if need be, I think he could be called up. And Ralph Webb, I feel like, has been here forever, dude. I feel like every offseason I see Ralph Webb, and it's really not been that long. But I'm just like, oh yeah, here comes Webb. He's back again. The offseason's here. Where's Ralph Webb?
Someone's got to play.
That's how I feel about him.
Someone's got to play in the fourth quarter of those preseason games.
Exactly, dude. I'm just like, okay, cool. We got our fourth quarter guy again. Here we go.
So obviously we're starting at the top with James Conner, a guy that in his 3-year NFL career has seen some pretty high mountains and some pretty low valleys as well. So last year, when he was healthy, James Conner was effective. The issue is he was so often injured and hurt. I mean, he missed, 5 games or 5 or 6 games, and then he got injured in 5 other games. So he was injured most of this season or dealing with something. A very tough year for him. He had a fumble issue 2 years ago. He had 4 2 years ago. He only had 1 last year, but you could argue it was the most crucial fumble of the season. One of them, anyways, against the 49ers that the Steelers eventually lost. A tough year for James Conner. This is probably the biggest year of his entire football career coming up. It's a real prove-it type of season for him.
Easily. This is 1 year. This is his last year on his contract, so he's got to either prove to the Steelers why he should stay, and I'm sure he wants to stay. He's been a Pittsburgh native basically his entire life. And but regardless, even if he doesn't end up there, he's proven for his next contract. He's got to run his wheels off if he has anything to run with.
Austin, you there, man?
I cut out?
Yes, sir.
Well, all I said was James Conner's just got to run his wheels off, man, for that next contract.
Gotcha. You're seeing these deals that running backs are cutting out in the open market. With James Conner's value being what it is right now, what do you think is most likely? Do you think the Steelers let him walk at this time next year? Do you think they put the franchise tag on him? Do you think they re-sign him to some sort of contract?
They're not putting another franchise tag on a running back. That's not happening. It doesn't even matter how.
Well, do you know what the official value on that tag was this year?
It's gone down from when Le'Veon Bell had to be franchise tagged. I think it was at 11, but it doesn't matter. James Conner could rush for like 1,500 yards, and I'm not putting the franchise tag. I'm not dealing with that for a running back. It's either he gets an extension or he walks. There's no franchise tagging a running back in my mind.
Remember,
I hate the idea.
Ben Roethlisberger's cap hit next year is going to be $40 million, so you're going to have to be really tight on that. I think he's going to end up walking too.
Yeah, he's probably going to walk because I feel like he's going to have a bounce back season, and then it's just the Steelers are not going to be able to pay a running back. It's just not, as we've seen, paying a running back doesn't pay off. All the guys that just got paid, Todd Gurley, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, They all are in trade talks or moved on already. Todd Gurley got cut. Sorry to break into our NFL news. Todd Gurley got cut, and he's now on the Falcons. It's because the Rams don't want to pay him. They gave him too much. David Johnson got traded. Too much. Well, he was injured, and then he was never the same. And David Johnson, when he got his deal, I was excited because he took less than market value, and it was still bad. It was still bad for the team. So even if you're paying an elite running back and you're getting a good deal out of it, you still get a bad deal out of it because of how bad running backs don't last. I mean, how
short their shelf life is. How short
it is, or how bad the shelf life is. I'm glad you understood what I was saying. I realized that was probably confusing.
No, you're good. I picked up what you were putting down.
Well, I'm ready to just every couple of years, ready to cycle to a new running back, and if they're bad, they're bad, and you hope you get a decent one. But I'm not really about paying big money to running backs anymore.
Not to mention Le'Veon Bell, they were already talking about trading him through one season. Not even that, half a season of his contract. I know part of that's just because of the coach, but regardless, you're talking about that. And then even Ezekiel Elliott, who just got his contract there, I've heard a lot of people talking about how he doesn't seem like the same runner that he was even just a couple of years ago.
Dude, I'm sure, in just a few seasons when we talk about how the Cowboys are moving on from Ezekiel Elliott. They have Dak and Amari Cooper already. It's just how are you going to pay all these guys?
And it sucks for running backs because they're the guys that touch the football more often than anybody besides the quarterback. And or I guess technically the center, but you know what I mean. And these are the guys putting their health on the line more than just about anyone else because they're touching it more and they're being tackled and they're being hit. But you can't trust these guys, and they're so easily disposable. This new CBA really doesn't help them that much. What they really need, what running backs really need, is instead of 4-year rookie contracts, they need 2 to 3 year rookie contracts. Because without that, they're never going to get paid. They just won't.
Exactly, dude. They're gonna be stuck on their contract forever, and by the end of their contract, if they don't get an extension, they're at risk of not getting it because they're already basically past their prime after the 4th year. Running backs only last about on average 7 years, so it's just
the good
rough
ones,
for them.
the good ones, that is.
The good ones. So a lot of the bad ones last a lot less than that.
And it's, I'll never begrudge guys like Gurley and like Elliott. And remember, our issue with Le'Veon Bell wasn't necessarily that he was holding out to get his money. It was that he lied to the team about showing up. I think I'm speaking correctly for you. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, mostly.
So, I don't know. I don't begrudge them necessarily for wanting their money because they know. They know it just like we do. And this whole free agency wave has proved it more than, and it will continue to happen, that these guys that sign long contracts never see the end of it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, it sucks for the running backs. Nothing's going to change now. The CBA is approved, and now it's another 11 years, but, well, maybe in 11 years something will change.
Time will tell. Maybe we'll all be gone with this whole COVID thing, but so we got to take it day by day. But let's move on to the other guys in the room, Snell and Samuels, the last 2 running backs taken in the draft by the Steelers. Snell flashed last year. I'm wondering just how much he's going to be able to play this season, how much there of a chance there is that he becomes the number 1 running back. And for Jalen Samuels, like you said, a disappointing 2019. I'm not convinced he's got a roster spot secure going into this year. He really disappointed last year.
The Steelers ran with a lot of running backs towards the end of the season, and now there's more roster spots. So his roster spot might be a little bit. I'm feeling like it's neutral because of the actual roster spots, but they could totally go with less running backs, I think, this year. They might opt to just keep Kareth White over Jalen Samuels and just run with James Conner, Benny Snell, and Kareth White and keep 3. They ended the year again with 5, which is ridiculous. I hope they don't do that again. I could see 4. They might keep Trey Edmonds as a special teams guy.
Well, remember, they're going to have a fullback on the roster at this point, too. They kept 5 in part because they didn't have a fullback at that time.
Make a good point. I was forgetting about that. Rosie Nix was on IR. So yeah, you're probably you could easily see it could be James Conner, Benny Snell, Kareth White, and then you have Derek Watt. That could easily be the lineup there. You have 4 halfbacks in total. So I agree. I don't think Jalen Samuels' rush spot is secure. I do hope the Steelers. I mean, they always should do their due diligence, but if they do end up doing that, I hope they could try and sell Jalen Samuels for like a 7th-round pick and say, hey, he's a pass catcher. He does stuff. But even then, I felt like his pass catching abilities last year kind of took a little bit of a dip.
He didn't necessarily excel in any one thing. He would be a jack of all trades, except it feels like he doesn't do any of the things that he does well, which is, it kind of, I feel bad saying that, but I don't know. It's just, even the game where he caught 13 passes against the Colts, didn't he drop like 2 passes in that game too?
I think so. Something like that.
So, I don't know. I'm hoping to see some more out of him, but I'm not very hopeful right now. But that being the case, the Steelers have right now 5 guys that were on the NFL roster at some point with the Steelers last year. I guess if you want to talk NFL players, it's technically 6 if you include Derek Watt. So that being the case, we know the Steelers aren't going to be looking for a fullback. So the only question here is halfback. I don't know about you, Austin. I've been listening to sports talk in Pittsburgh ever since the season ended. Everyone still seems convinced that halfback is the biggest position target in the draft for the first pick, which is number 49. I still just don't see the Steelers taking a running back in this draft. I understand the attraction, but I still don't see it. Am I wrong to not believe what these people are thinking?
I just disagree. I think with the investment of Benny Snell, I know it was only a 4th-round pick, and I mean, you saw James Conner for 1 year. I think you're okay there. I would much rather like a safety where it still doesn't make sense because you have Terrell Edmonds and Minka Fitzpatrick, but at least you need safety depth for this year, which I think that you don't need running back depth for this year. I feel like you have plenty of running backs here. And then also, if you decide Terrell Edmonds is going to work out, you might have a safety to replace him next year. I mean, you could make that argument for running back that you'll need a running back to replace James Conner for next year. But I just don't see the depth problem like I do with like a position like safety or even maybe edge rusher. It's just there's like a bunch of other positions I would rather address first, and I'm not a big fan of taking a running back with that 2nd-round pick. I'm not really even a fan of taking a running back in this draft, if I'm being honest with you.
And I think that's my biggest argument against it, is that the Steelers have taken a running back in 3 straight drafts. And if you take another one now, I think that's a pretty big indictment on Benny Snell, because even though he did flash and he did have some nice games at the end of the year, I think by taking one, you're sort of canceling out what he did, and you're saying it wasn't good enough. And yeah, I know that it wouldn't affect him as much as it probably affects James Conner, depending on when you take one. I still think that the Steelers plan on letting Conner walk and then making Snell the guy. So if you're taking another guy, you know how you called Benny Snell a luxury pick last year? Well, if you take a running back this year, that's really a luxury pick.
I feel like you have the running backs, like you have a good running back that just when he's healthy, he's good. You have a running back that flashed, so you just invested a pick in. You have another running back that you signed off a team's practice squad, and he actually has done really well when he got on the field. Like, I feel like you're fine here. And then you just signed a fullback. You just signed a fullback that's one of the best in the league, top 5 fullback. So, I mean, what do you need?
So, that being said, I'm still not buying it right now. I can probably be convinced if things changes or if things do change, but as of right now, I'm not buying it. That being said, if the Steelers do end up taking a running back in this draft, I see it being with that first pick, number 49. Otherwise, I don't see it at all.
I hope I don't see it at all, but yeah, it only makes sense because you're only going to get improvement if you take it at 49. That's the only way, because once you get into the 3rd round, you're not going to see a guy that you could say, oh, is going to be immediately better than James Conner or Benny Snell. I mean, that 2nd-round pick is like your only shot here for having a better running back or having a reason to take a running back, and I still disagree with it.
And make no mistake about it, if you're drafting right now to win right now, you're drafting to win this year and next year, because that's when Ben Roethlisberger, Marquise Pouncey, Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin, all their contracts are up, and some or all of them are expected to retire or resign. So your window's 2 years, so drafting a guy at that point doesn't help you this year, so that's a mistake. That's the only position where someone helps you this year. So I think that's where we're talking about. That's kind of where we're in agreement on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So that being said, we did take a look at 8 different running backs this year. You want to give me a brief overview of the 4 guys you looked at and where they went to school?
Sure. So the 4 guys that I chose to look at are J.K. Dobbins from Ohio State, then Zach Moss from Utah, James Robinson from Illinois State, and then the last one is Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU. Who are your 4 guys?
I took a look at Jonathan Taylor, the running back from Wisconsin, A.J. Dillon from Boston College, Cam Akers from Florida State, and Raymond Calais. I thought his name was Calais, but it is Calais is how you pronounce it, from Louisiana Lafayette. So the 3 names that I've heard connected to the Steelers a lot already is Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, and J.K. Dobbins. So with that being the case, would you want to start with talking about either Dobbins or Moss first?
Yeah, I'll start with Dobbins. And just to add to that, I've heard Moss probably the most. That's why I chose Moss after Dobbins. But so J.K. Dobbins, he's a junior. He's 5'9" and 209 pounds. His full name is Jacqueline. Jacqueline Dobinson had the greatest childhood. His father was arrested in 2012 for theft of property and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Unfortunately, then, his father passed away in prison before ever getting out at only the age of 33. Still, J.K. pushed on and was considered a 4-star recruit coming into his senior season of high school. Unfortunately, he broke his leg on his first carry in his first game of the season, but he was still able to make it to Ohio State even without his senior year tape. Not only that, he recovered from his injury and was able to become a starter as a true freshman, despite not playing football for over a year. It was a truly impressive first season, too. He averaged 7.2 yards per carry, which ranked 7th in the FBS, in 14 starts, and had 1,412 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, and 22 catches for 135 yards. This was good enough to earn him second-team All-Big Ten honors, and also good enough to win himself the MVP of the Big Ten championship game. In his sophomore season, he earned second-team All-Conference again after starting 12 of 14 games, garnering 1,053 yards and 230 carries for a 3.6 yards per carry, 26 catches for 285 yards, and a total of 10 touchdowns. This past season, he was in the running for the Heisman Trophy, having received second-team Associated Press All-American accolades and winning Big Ten Running Back of the Year award, and obviously first-team All-Conference accolades for his impressive 2,003 rushing yards on 301 carries for an average of 6.7 yards a carry, while also leading the nation in rushing touchdowns with 21 and adding 23 catches for 247 yards and 2 touchdowns from the air in his 14 starts. So with nothing left to prove, Dobbins decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft. And starting with his positives, I think the best way to describe Dobbins is just toughness, whether it be mental or physical. He had never missed a game in his college career, choosing to play through injuries to help his team, like when he suffered an ankle injury versus Clemson and continued to play. And not only continued to play, but play effectively. That was really the story for his entire college career. The dude was a bell cow in 2019 and was still able to play all year and have big games against really tough teams. Then for a relatively smaller guy, he plays with a lot of strength, probably because he's built well. Anyhow, defenses need to wrap tackle him and wrap tackle him good. Otherwise, he's going to bounce off and keep going. And even if he does get wrapped, he's going to be spinning and stretching for those extra yards. Then as a blocker, he's able and willing to take on cornerback blitzes, having done so effectively against Clemson in 2019. Then what I loved about him were his cuts. They were so clean and fluid, often making guys miss. And you really saw that a lot against Wisconsin, where he destroyed that poor team. And just literally as a one-man wrecking crew. The highlights of the Wisconsin game are literally all him. Kind of going along with his cuts. As a route runner, he's very effective at separating on angle routes, and as a runner, he's good at slipping inside of overflow pursuit. Kind of plays to his elusiveness as well, and where I saw his elusiveness shine was on slip screens. He really played those well. both in selling and actually getting the ball. Last couple of things that he's shown good peripheral vision once he gets to the second level, and he also doesn't try to get cute or anything, like the type of plays that lead to fumbles. So going to the other side of things, my biggest problem was probably his pass protection. While he did succeed against cornerbacks, he really struggled in helping his linemen when blocking. I just felt like there were so many times where I saw him looking for who to block rather than make a decision, and he ends up helping no one. He ends up just standing there, looking around. He also seems to be confused on his assignments at times when it comes to blocking, but those two kind of go hand in hand. Then I don't think he has the NFL breakaway speed. He definitely doesn't have the stop-start quickness to stack moves and go, but I felt like even on plays he got into open space, he was being caught. He just dealt with a lot of bad tackling that allowed him to keep going. And I don't feel like that's going to be the same story in the NFL. He also has to slow down to cut, and that's like one of his best things. So that does hurt that it's a double-edged sword, and he doesn't always use it to his advantage. Like when he's in space, he doesn't really cut as much to shake defenders or change his speed to have linebackers keep guessing. The last thing is I felt like he was only okay as a pass catcher, which isn't necessarily a bad thing since I can't call him bad, but he's just not good either. He just seems like he's okay. There were times where he took his head off the ball, his eyes off the ball to try and start running, and he dropped the pass. And one was an empty space, so that left a bad taste in my mouth. But overall, that's just all the bad things for him. So overall, Lance Zierlein has compared him to Dominic Williams, who I actually had to Google because I didn't remember him. He only lasted 3 years in the NFL, all with the Houston Texans. To me, he reminds me of the muscle hamster, Doug Martin, in his early years. They're both 5'9" and within a pound of each other. And besides Martin probably being a better pass catcher, I think they are relatively close. I also think their draft position will be very close. I could easily see Dobbins go off the board at 32 to the Chiefs, where Martin was taken at 31 by the Bucs back in 2012. I do think of Dobbins as more of a second rounder. And with this class of running backs being pretty stacked, it may deflate his value, but I am still fairly confident in going the second round just for his toughness alone. So again, that was J.K. Dobbins out of Ohio State. I watched his games against Michigan State, Clemson, and Wisconsin in 2019, as well as his highlights. Which prospect do you want to look at first? I'm guessing A.J. Dillon.
I'm actually going to start with Jonathan Taylor just because I think that is someone that I've heard the Steelers tied to at least somewhat. Quick question with Dobbins, I know that we're not really for running backs for the Steelers right now, but what do you think about Dobbins possibly being drafted? If he's drafted, do you think that he is a guy that could be like a co-starter with James Conner right away?
I think he could be a co-starter right away. I think he shows that ability. I think that if the Steelers were to take him with their first pick in the NFL draft, that he could make an instant impact as a running back. I think he could play alongside James Conner.
Is he the only one of your four guys that you think of that highly of?
Sorry, one more time?
Is he the only guy that you think that highly of from your four running backs? Like, do you see anyone else being a co-starter?
No.
Okay.
It's quite literally only him in my mind.
That's actually exactly how I feel about Jonathan Taylor. So the workhorse guy from Wisconsin, tore it up at the combine, was first of all running backs in the 40-yard dash with a 4.39. Taylor, obviously, when you're talking about Wisconsin, you've got a lot of really good running backs like Monty Ball and Ron Dane among Corey Clement and others. Taylor followed in the footsteps of guys like Dane and Clement, who put up 2,815 yards as a senior in high school. He immediately produced as a freshman, was a second-team All-American in the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, and a finalist for the Doak Walker Award, which is the best running back in the FBS. He had 1,977 yards and 13 touchdowns in his freshman season, and he followed that up with an even better year, his sophomore year, a unanimous first-team All-American and the Doak Walker Award winner, Big Ten Running Back of the Year, and led the FBS in rushing with 2,194 yards and 16 touchdowns. He also had 205 rushing yards in the Pinstripe Bowl win over Miami. And this past season, he became just the second halfback in FBS history with back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons with just over 2,000 with 2003. and 21 touchdowns, and was also a first-team All-American again. He also participated on the Badgers track team last year in an effort to improve his speed. So you're talking right now about a guy that you can count on one hand, the number of guys who ran for more yards than he did in college. That's pretty impressive. So you want to talk about the things that are nice about Jonathan Taylor. The first thing you'll notice is that he just looks like an NFL running back, and he stacks up in terms of measurables when he's on the field. He has fantastic durability during his college career. He had, in his 3 seasons, he had 299, 307, and 320 rushes, respectively, in those 3 seasons. So he touched the ball a ton. He averaged over 2,000 yards per season in college, and a big part of that was 12 200-plus rushing yard games. And he got this by being explosive and patient, too. So he's a guy that can run in multiple schemes. He's a good one-cut runner. And again, that burst between the tackles and on the edge is evident. He's got a strong forward lean and leg churn to push the pile and get extra yards. He has good balance. And I mentioned the whole participating in track. That track star speed is evident on tape. So he's not just a fast guy. He plays fast, too. And he's not the most elusive guy, but he is elusive, too. And even though he didn't put up big pass-catching numbers, he did improve significantly in his junior year compared to his first 2 seasons. But obviously when you're talking about a guy that has such a large amount of production in college, there's 2 big negatives. And the first one is that he had over 950 career touches and 900 carries in just 3 seasons. And despite the nice production, that kind of wear is a concern for longevity at the NFL level. And this is the other one, is that fumbles are a huge, huge problem for him. I thought that it was a little bit overblown, and he has 15 in his career. But I figured when you factor in how much he touches the ball, it's kind of it wouldn't be as bad. But Austin, listen to this. So for reference, we know Le'Veon Bell doesn't fumble much, right? So he fumbles roughly once every 206 of his touches, which is pretty darn impressive. James Conner, meanwhile, who's been considered someone who fumbles a lot, he averages 1 fumble for roughly every 90 and a half of his touches. Taylor, on the other hand, averages just 64 and a half touches between fumbles. That means he averages a fumble like every 2.5 to 3 games. That's not good at all. So that's obviously a huge concern. And I've also noticed on the tape that he's kind of inconsistent when it comes to reading defenses. He made some bad decisions, which seemed odd. He was kind of slow in that process. And for a guy that has power and speed like he does, he doesn't drive his feet when going into contact as often as you want, so he gets overpowered. And he was taken off the field on a lot of passing downs during his career, so he's not a reliable receiver. And he had a lot of drops for someone with so few catches during his career. So, all in all, only 5 running backs had more rushing yards than he did. Jonathan Taylor, a guy with great strength and durability, that's going to give him a shot in the league. And I think he's going to be a talented player in the NFL. He can make people miss. He can power over them and go the distance on long runs. On one hand, his experience is a plus because it's made him better and a more patient runner. But on the other hand, his longevity in the NFL may be cut short due to the fact that he had just under 1,000 touches in college. I mean, that's a lot. And then you add into the fact that his fumbling concerns are a huge issue. That's probably going to keep him from being a feature back for a long time in this league. Despite these issues and his lack of experience and production as a receiver, I think he's a guy that can play right away. And while he doesn't have the same ceiling as guys like Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott, like what they had, he's most likely going to be one of the first 2 or 3 running backs taken. I think he's going to be either a late first-round pick or a day 2 selection from what I'm seeing. And like I said, I think he's one of like 2 possible running backs that could be drafted by the Steelers in this draft. So, take what you will from that. I looked at his games against Michigan State, at Illinois, and against Iowa from this season. So, Jonathan Taylor, a guy you're hearing a lot about, The hype is real with him. He's a good player, but again, we'll see. So that being said, who do you want to talk about next?
We'll go with Zach Moss, because as I said, that he was probably the one I've seen the most mocked to the Steelers. He was a senior at Utah. He's 5'9" and 223 pounds. And just to start off, you don't understand how mad it made me with how he spells his name. So he shortens his name to Zach to Z-A-C-K. There's no K in his full name. I kept spelling with an H because there's an H in his full name, but he puts a K when he shortens it, and that pisses me off. His full name is Zacchaeus Moss, and that's Zaccheus. So that's just a little thing that pissed me off when I immediately saw it. I was like, why does he spell his name with a K when there's an H in his name?
Oh, that's awful. He's undraftable.
I was like, I'm already mad. Like, why don't you make it Zach with an H? Whatever. I was so mad. He was originally supposed to attend Miami, like his cousins Santana and Cinnerice Moss. And Santana you'll probably remember most as a Redskin, even though he was drafted with the Jets. And Cinnerice you might not remember at all, but he was with the
Giants.
He was with the. Yeah, you do remember. Yeah, he was with the Giants during their Super Bowl windows. But anyway. So he's their cousins, but after Miami decided to move on from head coach Al Golden in 2015, he decided to take his talent to Salt Lake City instead. As a true freshman, he got to play in 10 games and even started 3, while also missing 3 games due to injury. In those 10 games, though, he ran for 382 yards, 2 touchdowns, and had 4.5 yards per carry. In his sophomore season, he started 12 of 13 games and really brought his game to the next level, rushing for 1,173 yards and 10 touchdowns, and a nice 5.5 yards per carry. He was also very important in the Heart of Dallas Bowl, where he had 150 yards on 20 carries and a touchdown. In 2018, he finally got recognition for his play, earning second-team All-Pac-12 honors, and could have been first-team if not for a bizarre injury he suffered getting into his bed that caused him to miss 4 games. Still, in his 9 starts, he rushed for 1,092 yards and 11 touchdowns for a 6.1 yards per carry. He probably would have declared in his junior year if not for the injury. However, it may have helped him to come back for his senior season as he decided to go crazy stat-wise, ending up with 12 starts through 13 games, collecting 1,416 yards and 15 rushing touchdowns with a yards per carry of 6, and then also proving he could contribute in the passing game with 28 receptions for 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, Zach Moss decided to declare for the draft following his senior season. So let's start with his positives. He's another guy who's well-built with a lot of muscle, maybe a little bit too much weight, but at the NFL level, it could help him. The weight in college has allowed him to be a freight train, running through tacklers, lowering his pads, and powering for those extra yards. Arm tackles will not get him down. He is way too big for that. Not only does he use his size, he has an effective spin move he used a lot in 2019 and seemingly worked every time, at the very minimum getting him an extra yard or 2, but sometimes leading to some big runs. I think he's going to be an excellent goal line and short distance back in the NFL, as he has that small space power to move the chains and possesses elite contact bounce. He can also succeed against early penetration, staying calm and having solid vision and feel for running lanes. Last thing is he has both patience and urgency when each is necessary. He's got a good feel for that. So going to the other side of things, the thing I noticed the most when even watching his highlights was his speed. It takes him a while to get to his max speed, and his max speed isn't that high. He finished the combine tied as the 4th slowest running back, and while with Dobbins it was a question of whether or not he can get away from NFL speed, Zach Moss definitely will not be able to. Then with his run style, there are always going to be the durability concerns, and he has been hurt a few times in his college career, including having season-ending meniscus surgery in 2018. So there are concerns there as well. Then despite him showing some good chips on tape, I feel like there wasn't enough tape on his pass blocking, at least not a lot of good tape. He seemed to have the same problems Dobbins had, where he needs to help his linemen more and make a decision rather than sit there. But again, Moss wasn't asked to block as much at Utah, so I don't know. It may have been a strength issue as well. His bench press at the combine wasn't bad at all, but I was still disappointed for a guy sitting at 5'9", 223 pounds. I thought he was going to be able to be a top 5 performer there, and he was not. Then he plays with tight hips that limit his turn radius on the first and second level and cause him to take additional steps for making cut. So that he doesn't like to put his moves together, even though he has got some really nice ones in his arsenal. and in the past, fumbling has been an issue for him, which could return with stronger competition at the NFL level. So, Lance Zierlein compared him to Marion Barber, a guy drafted in the 4th round by the Dallas Cowboys in 2005 and played 6 seasons in the NFL. There's another guy I didn't really know, but I don't have a better comparison for Zach Moss like I did with J.K. Dobbins. I think that Moss will never be a bell cow in the NFL. I think he's going to be a great short yardage situations and such kind of guy, but to me, his speed is a concern. I'm not confident in his abilities as a blocker, so that he could be used as a 3rd down running back. Also, his injury history does concern me. So to me, Moss projects as a late 3rd round pick or an early 4th round pick, with me personally leaning towards 4th, as I think he fits best as a rotational piece, which isn't bad at all, especially in today's NFL. Rotational running back rooms are becoming increasingly common, and a lot of good teams are using them. Take, for example, the Chiefs and the 49ers in this past year's Super Bowl. But I just personally wouldn't take him in the 3rd, even though some people have mocked him to the Steelers there. That's where I've seen a lot of people take him. People have been saying that he could be the Steelers' first 3rd round pick. And I'm not really about that. But again, that was Zach Moss from Utah. I watched him versus BYU, versus Texas, and versus Oregon in 2019. And then I also watched his highlights. So which prospect would you like to talk about next?
Do you want me to talk about the guy that was compared to Duke Johnson or the guy that was compared to James Conner?
Let's do James Conner.
All right, in that case, I'm going to be talking about A.J. Dillon from Boston College. So Dillon, I saw his games against Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida State this year. And obviously, he was the guy that was comped by Lance Zierlein to James Conner. And he is a tall junior, a tall junior standing at 6 feet tall and weighing in at 247 pounds. This is a big, big man, especially for a running back. And he still ran a 4.53, so he had the 10th best 40-yard dash time of any running back at the Combine, so that's pretty darn good. Just a little tidbit about A.J. Dillon. Excuse me. His grandfather was actually the first African-American team captain at Notre Dame, so that's kind of cool.
Oh, man, that is pretty cool.
Just a little bit of history with Dillon there. He decided to commit to Boston College, and the big reason for that is because he played his high school ball under head coach Paul Zukaskus, I believe is how you say it, who was a Boston College offensive lineman back in the day. So obviously, the Eagles were pretty thankful for that. So Dillon started off his Eagles career by winning ACC Rookie of the Year. He was a freshman All-American and finished 7th in the FBS in rushing with 300 carries for 1,589 yards and 14 touchdowns. So that's a pretty good way to burst onto the scene. And he followed that up with not quite as good a season, but it was still another good year. First team All-ACC. In just 10 games, he had 1,108 yards, 10 touchdowns, and averaged 4.9 yards per carry. He did cut his fumbles down from 4 to 1, so that was pretty good to see. And then last year, he was a third-team All-American and, again, first-team All-ACC with 1,685 yards and 14 touchdowns. So this guy has been another big producer on the ground, much like Jonathan Taylor, although not quite that much, but he still produced a lot. So what do you like about what you see from A.J. Dillon? And the first thing you have to notice is that size. He is a massive and powerful man. He does look a lot like, I know you hear this all the time with big backs, but he does look kind of like a modern-day Jerome Bettis. And even with that big size, he's athletic. And again, he's pretty fast, despite that size and weight. He ran for 150-plus yards in over one-third of his college games. That's pretty big. And he scored 39 career touchdowns, so he knows how to get to the end zone. And with that big frame and strength, he can push the pile, but he actually showed over his career that he can leap over the pile, too. So, I don't know about you, but seeing a 6-foot, 250-pound man flying at me trying to score is not something I really want to see all that often. Oh, sorry about that. Any case, he's so powerful that guys just bounce off him sometimes. You hear that kind of like jokingly, like, oh, guys bounce off him. Well, they really do, and I saw it on tape. Maybe they just didn't really want to tackle him. I guess I wouldn't blame him that much. One thing that's kind of nice, you really see this with some of these bigger backs when they get to the NFL, is they try to be off-script runners because they could get away with it in college. Guys that, there are no holes where the play is being designed, so they'll try to make a big play somewhere else. Dillon doesn't really do that. He's a guy that sticks to the script and lets his plays develop, so that's pretty nice. He has a grinded-out workhorse mentality, which is really nice to see. Which game was it? I believe it was, the Florida State game. He had 40 carries, so he toted the rock a bunch of times. He has a nasty stiff arm, and he's a good pass protector. He takes on blitzing linebackers with authority. And, that concludes the positives for Dillon. As far as the negatives go, he was able to get by in college being at 250 pounds, but that's not likely to work in the NFL. He's probably going to need to cut weight to get faster, and long-term durability is a concern. Because of the way he plays and because of how big he is, he got nicked up a lot during his career. He played a lot, but he did get nicked up too. He's also not a very elusive guy, certainly not in the backfield, so if you can get him stopped in the backfield, he's not going to be able to get past the line of scrimmage. He also doesn't have a big-time burst at the second level. He has that great speed, but that change of direction, the quickness in small spaces, he doesn't really have. He does get confused in pass protection. He's willing, but he does get confused in it. He did not catch a lot of passes in college, and he wasn't very good at it. He had a horrible drop against Florida State with the game on the line that they eventually lost as well. So, like I said, there's a lot to like with A.J. Dillon, and there's a lot familiar that I saw, which, of course, Lance Zierlein saw as well, which is why he compared him to James Conner. I did see that, but I kind of liken a comparison more to Benny Snell from last year a little more. I guess that's not that much of a difference either way. Dillon is a guy that Steelers fans would fall in love with because he looks and plays like a prototypical Steelers halfback. A proven commodity at Boston College, he wears down defenses with his physical style, and while not turning the ball over, he uses his blockers and his physicality to his advantage. But that lack of elusiveness and burst could limit his upside as a runner, but the big question is whether he can ever develop hands. If he does, he could possibly become a starter, but otherwise that's going to hold him back. I think he's a late day 2, possibly day 3 guy right now. But again, another guy that's just not someone the Steelers need because they already have so many of those kinds of players. So that being said, that was A.J. Dillon from Boston College. Who do you want to talk about next, Austin?
I want to do Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's a junior from LSU. As I said, he's 5'7" and 207 pounds. Edwards-Helaire was a 4-star recruit coming out of Catholic High School in Baton Rouge and ended up signing with his hometown team, LSU. As a true freshman, he was used as a reserve back and special teams player, having 9 carries for 31 yards, 3 receptions for 46 yards, and 13 kick returns for 427 yards, which was a 32.8 yards per return average. In 2018, he got to be the starter with Geis leaving for the NFL draft and ended up leading the team in all-purpose yards with 648 yards on the ground with 4.5 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns, 11 receptions for 96 yards, and then 17 returns for 416 yards, a 24.5 yards per return. In 2019, he earned first-team All-SEC honors as a running back and also second-team All-SEC honors as a returner after starting 14 of 15 games, rushing for 1,415 yards and 16 touchdowns on 215 carries, which is a 6.6 yards per carry, while also adding on 55 receptions for 453 yards and a touchdown there, and adding 10 returns for 214 yards as a kick returner. After his best season, he declared for the draft. He is the most experienced and probably the best pass catcher out of all the backs I looked at. He ran a bunch of routes out of the backfield while also being split out wide, and his routes are actually really good. His yards after the catch are great too. He's good at making people miss when he gets the ball in his hands with all the movesets he uses, like a spin move, a jump cut, and a sudden double cut. Then another thing that's exclusive to him compared to the other backs I looked at is he was a 3-year kick returner, including second-team honors for it in his final season. So he offers some special teams abilities right off the bat, even if he doesn't immediately get to play on offense. Then he probably has the best ball security out of all the backs I looked at. He got the ball a lot of times in college and hardly ever fumbled. Then his cuts are super clean. He can cut and go anywhere on the field without stopping. It makes it hard for would-be tacklers to predict where he will go. Also, if he does get hit, he can gather himself quickly because he runs low to the ground and it gives him good bend and balance. Lastly, he can alter his run tempo to trick flowing linebackers. So flipping to the other side of things, it's not the biggest negative in the world, but I saw a few drops on tape that he definitely should have caught. It's definitely a volume bias because he was throwing the ball a lot more than the other prospects, but still. Part of the problem could be that he has a shorter wingspan and therefore a shorter catch radius, but regardless, that's a whole other negative in itself. Then, while totally not anywhere close to as bad as I thought of former LSU teammate Devin White, but I watched his games against Auburn, Texas, and Georgia, and his 2019 highlights, and I felt like he was super effective. I felt like he wasn't super effective on the ground against those teams, not the highlights, of course, but meanwhile, I saw him beat up on teams like Arkansas and Louisiana Tech in his highlights. Again, though, not anywhere as bad as I thought of Devin White. If you guys have been listening for a while, you know I hated Devin White.
That's your mans.
He was super overrated.
That's your mans.
What'd you say?
That's your mans.
That is my man's. It must be an LSU thing. I think every single LSU prospect I've looked at, I've hated.
Come on, man.
That's a little bit of...
Go Tigers.
It's a little bit of an exaggeration because I'm... do you know the Jacksonville wide receiver that's from LSU?
Oh, Chark. DJ Chark.
Yeah, I like Chark. So it was a little bit... but I hated Devin White. I didn't like Darius Geis. With Helaire, I thought his tape was... wasn't as great as I was hoping it would be. Same with Geis, though. But anyway, back to that. Yeah, like I was saying, it's not as bad as Devin White. Edwards-Helaire actually had some good plays on the ground against those teams and was definitely effective through the air. Then he's another guy that doesn't have great play speed. His speed to get to the corner is just average. He doesn't have the speed to get those really long runs without being caught, especially at the NFL level. Then since he is smaller, his power in short yard situations is just average. He actually had, I believe, the fourth worst bench press at the combine. I'm sorry, third worst. He was tied for the third worst. That's why I thought it was fourth at the combine. So he doesn't really have all that strength. I think it's going to get worse at the NFL level. And then the last thing is his RPOs made run linebackers more tentative early in the run. Oh, and something I want to say about his positives. Now that I think about saying that he was tied for the third worst at the bench press, he was also had a really good vert, and with him being a pretty good pass catching back, that was good. He was tied for the third best vertical, so that's something I wanted to add. So announcers compared him to Darren Sproles, Lance Zierlein compared him to Devontae Freeman, and I'm going to compare him to Jalen Richard mostly, but he is somewhere between Richard and Sproles in my mind. I just see the pass catching abilities as his best thing, and his size is comparable to both Richard and Sproles. And he was a returner and was pretty elusive, like Sproles. Overall, Edwards-Helaire is rated as the third best running back in the draft, according to NFL.com and also WalterFootball.com. But to me, I'm weary of that. I wouldn't draft Helaire until the third or fourth round, personally, and I'm leaning towards the fourth. But I think he's going to be drafted in the second. I think that's a reach. I really only view him as a rotational piece as well. And when I say Jalen Richard, I actually love Jalen Richard. I loved him on the Raiders. I've been a big fan of his. But he doesn't ever tote the ball. He's just there to run routes and pass catch. And he's good at it. It's what he does. And Helaire could be a little bit better than that because he provides special teams. But I don't see Helaire as I see him as a poor man's Austin Eckler. That's how I should probably compare it. I think that with how good Austin Eckler is, I think that's what Edwards-Helaire can be. And people love Eckler like I like Richard. So I feel like that might be a good comparison because I know people do know that Austin Eckler doesn't really tote the ball either, but he can really, really make great plays in the air. Anyhow, again, that was... Wow, I'm forgetting his first name. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm thinking Edwards-Helaire is his full name, and I keep thinking that. But yeah, that was Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU. I watched his games versus Georgia 2019, versus Texas in 2019, and Auburn 2019, along with his highlights. Who was your last prospect?
No, I have two more.
I went first. Duh.
All right, I'll go with Cam Akers next from Florida State. So he's a little bit different from He's a little bit different from A.J. Dillon. He's a little bit shorter and he's slimmer. But he still had pretty good numbers at the combine. He had 4.47 40 time. But his 20-yard shuttle was not very good. He was 15th out of 16th there. So, brief overview on Cam Akers. He's a former top 10 recruit. He was a dual-threat quarterback in high school, so that'll come into play in a little bit. I'll explain. He broke Dalvin Cook's school record for rushing as a freshman in 2017, 1,024 yards, 7 touchdowns, and third-team All-ACC. His production dipped in 2018, but he still led the team in rushing yards with 706 and 6 touchdowns, caught 23 passes that year, up from 16 the year before. And this past year, second-team All-ACC with 1,144 yards, 14 touchdowns, and caught 30 passes for 225 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, even though Akers is definitely smaller than guys like Dillon and Jonathan Taylor, I noticed that he's still a powerful runner despite this slimmer build. He's got a terrific center of balance. He can run through weaker arm tackles, so that kind of makes up a little bit for the fact that he's not as big. And he is more elusive, and he has a killer spin move that I saw on tape. He's agile. He can change direction without losing speed. And again, a theme with these running backs that I've noticed this year is that they're patient. They have good vision for the most part, and Akers is no exception to that. And, as I mentioned, a former dual-threat quarterback in high school. He was known to throw passes in college. I even sent Austin a little clip of a trick play where he threw a pass earlier today. So he can be used in trick plays, so that's pretty cool. He's a good finisher in the end zone. So he had 18 touchdowns last year, and even 2 years ago when he struggled a bit, he still had 8 touchdowns in what was considered a down year for him at that time. So he can get to the end zone too. He's an effective screen pass receiver, and he has the want-to and pass protection. Solid coaching back there is going to make him a rock. And something that I'm sure he didn't see as a positive, but scouts are going to take into account as a positive, is that he ran behind what I consider to be some of the worst offensive linemen I have ever seen in the ACC conference in 2019 alone. Sources seem to suggest that his offensive lines have been even worse in years prior. Austin, I kid you not, I know that pass protection doesn't matter as much for the offensive linemen when we're looking at running backs, but good Lord, these guys were terrible. I mean, the poor quarterbacks of Florida State were getting sacked or hit on every freaking play, and I don't think that Akers had much of a choice to be a good pass protector, because he was getting hit every play too when he was in protection. It's not like he was standing around trying to find people to block. He had to block 1 or 2 players on every play. I mean, that's how bad it was, just in the passing game. And in the running game, he had very little help as well. So, I mean,
that sucks a lot, honestly. But it must be tough to be a running back and when your whole offensive line is terrible for you. I mean, running back and quarterback, and you have to make it work. It just sucks for your draft stock and everything. I mean, maybe when people watch tape, they keep that in mind, like you are right now. So, but still,
I mean, it'll certainly be nice if he ends up with a good offensive line, but time will tell. So those were all the, I guess, good things, or things that kind of work in his favor. As far as things that kind of work against him, similar to Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers had issues with fumbles. He had 5 his sophomore season, and despite putting up a great 40 time at the combine, he didn't quite play as fast or necessarily have as many explosive runs. He had a couple, but not a ton. He takes a lot of big hits, too, for some reason. I don't know if that's necessarily a skill or something, but he kind of reminds me of James Conner, where remember how Lev Bell, even though he touches the ball a ton, it feels like he never gets destroyed with hits. Meanwhile, James Conner, it feels like, is getting crushed. I feel like that's what's happening to Cam Akers, too. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I don't know if that's necessarily a skill, but it's got to mean something, right?
I think so, man. I think It's got to be, but just like at the end, I feel like it's like really how you angle your body, like once the hit is coming.
And when you consider he has a slightly smaller build, that could make for a shorter NFL career too. He's also a little indecisive on short yardage plays, and he'll miss his openings. And again, when you're playing with an offensive line as bad as the ones he's been with the past few years, you don't necessarily want to be too indecisive. So that's not necessarily a good thing. He had decent receiving numbers, but he's just not very effective at it. He had troubles reeling in passes away from his body, so unless if you're putting the ball right between the numbers, he's not going to have a good time with it. And due to the fact that he played behind such terrible offensive linemen, he had to be kind of a... Oh, I just explained it with Dylan. What was it? He's kind of an improviser back there sometimes. So he's going to have to learn to be more of a by-the-book running back when he gets to the NFL. So that actually means that, running backs are usually guys that can step in and play right away. That might not actually be the case with Akers. He might need a little time to iron things out before he becomes a legitimate threat. So despite the inconsistent production and playing with little to no help up front, Akers had a pretty solid college career and has good physical tools to build on. Experts seem to think that Akers is going to be starter in the year by League 3, and while I can see that, I'm just not quite as high on him as others seem to be. The fumbling concerns and questions about his receiving ability really do make me wonder if he can ever become that 3-down running back that teams covet. Right now, he looks like a day 2 pick right now, possibly early day 3. That seems a little bit rich for me. Not by a ton, though. I think he'll be a solid player. Honestly, I like what I saw from some things about all these running backs. But again, just not a guy that the Steelers are really going to need. So, all that being said, your last running back is going to be James Robinson, right, from Illinois State. I wanted to look at him, so I'm kind of curious as to what you think about him.
Oh man, you should let me know. I'm sorry. I just picked one late prospect, but
no, it's not an issue, man. I want to look at a bunch of different guys. Like, remember, I wanted to look at Kelly from UCLA. I'll have a profile on him at some point. And there were like 3 other guys. I was like, I want to see what they do. So I mean, it's just a numbers game, so it's not a big deal. And also, I saw the games for Akers. I saw his games against Virginia, North Carolina State, and Boise State this year. Just want to get that in, but go ahead.
Gotcha, yeah. Honestly, I picked James Robinson because I don't know if there'll ever be a time that we'll look at another prospect from Illinois State. Sometimes when I'm looking for a last prospect, I look for a school that I had never seen before, that we had never done. And I went back to confirm, because we all have this on a document. We have never looked at a prospect from Illinois State, and I mean, like who knows the next time that'll happen, to be honest. But anyway.
I like that.
James
too.
Exactly, dude. James Robinson is 5'9" and 219 pounds. He came out of high school as the leading rusher in Illinois history after having 9,045 yards in his 4 seasons. He also had 158 touchdowns in those 4 seasons, which ranked 4th all-time in the nation.
My God.
At the time he graduated. Yeah, dude did everything, man. He was that entire offense. This is going to be basically... You're going to hear me talk about this. This is going to be the story of James Robinson. He decided to stay close to home and go to Illinois State, where he played in 9 games as a true freshman, rushing for 322 yards on 63 carries, 2 touchdowns, and adding 12 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown through the air. As a sophomore, he became the lead back and earned first-team All-Missouri Valley Football Conference recognition for his 933 yards with a 5.7 yards per carry, 12 touchdowns, and 9 catches for 75 yards in the receiving game. Despite getting first-team recognition in 2017, he stepped up his game further in his junior season, becoming a finalist for the Walter Payton Award, which goes to the top FCS player. Obviously, he was once again a first-team conference pick, but he from the Associated Press, earning himself third-team All-American status for 1,290 yards with a 6.3 yards per carry, another 12 touchdowns, and adding 21 catches for 164 yards and a touchdown through the air. But wait, Billy Mays, there's more. In his final season, he was able to get all the way to first-team All-American and all-conference honors after leading the entire FCS in carries with 364, second in yards with 1,917, having yards per carry of 5.3, finishing sixth in rushing touchdowns with 18 and also adding 16 catches for 80 yards while leading his team to the national title game. So James Robinson has run his damn wheels off between high school and college. I mean, he just finished leading the nation in carries this past season. So the offense runs through him. Anyway, first and foremost, before watching his tape, I was a little worried about his receiving numbers, but Jesus, was his offense and specifically his quarterbacks terrible. Watching the 2019 championship game, Jefferson didn't have I'm not kidding about this. Jefferson didn't have a completion until the third quarter. I swear to you. Literally, I'm watching, I'm not realizing, and the announcer says it. That's his first completion of the game. It's like halfway through the third quarter. I was like sitting there like, wow, this is terrible. They had ran it 13 straight times before that. Imagine how hard it must have been for Robinson that teams basically asked them to throw by loading the box. This is basically the Giants' dilemma. When you know that they're going to run with Saquon Barkley, so the team just load the box. But they all know they're going to run it. That's all this offense runs through James Robinson. That's it. They could have this team without a quarterback because James Robinson was their team. So, anyway, enough pissing on their poor quarterback situation. As a blocker, he was totally willing and he found work. He just has excellent recognition of the blitz to be able to pick it up. And there was times I was super impressed as he would be left one-on-one with the linebacker. Sorry. I lost my place. But I know I was talking about him being a blocker. Yeah, he was one-on-one with a linebacker and he could handle it. Granted, it was lower level of competition, but I found it to be very impressive still that he was able to keep up with linebackers. There's hope for it to transfer too. His combine performance was impressive, and that's what makes me think it can transfer. He tied for the third most bench press reps of all running backs. So now when you think about that compared to Dobbins, Moss, and Edwards-Helaire, he did better than all of those guys. And those guys, I was questionable of their pass blocking. So I think that James Robinson could be the best pass blocker here, as he has good recognition and he has the strength to back it up. I think that it could transfer better than my other three prospects, if I'm being honest. But anyway, then he has good vision that carries over to his running too. He's good at finding lanes near the end zone and anticipating run lane development. Then he also runs with solid patience, running behind lead blocks and cutting them off at the last possible second. Last thing is that he can balance through contact pretty well. So going to the negatives, due to being the only offense for his team for basically 2 years, he may have had his wheels run off by having over 500 carries the past 2 years. And that doesn't include what he did in high school. So the wear is definitely there. Then, despite being less weight than Zach Moss and only 10 pounds more than Dobbins, he doesn't have a good body type for an NFL running back. He's more girthy. Then, despite me thinking his strength is good for the NFL level, everything else could have been watered down by his competition. There were a few times I watched his tape and thought that had he played at a D1 school, he would have been tackled, and I'm not sure he would have been able to bounce all tacklers as effectively at a higher level. Thinking of bouncing, he tends to bounce it out wide, and he's not that kind of runner at all. He should not be running to the outside, but he does try to do that a lot. Then his speed is a concern. At least when it comes to acceleration, he's actually faster than Zach Moss, but his burst at the line is so much slower, so it doesn't feel like he's faster than Zach Moss. And he also doesn't make quick decisions when running up the interior, which also makes him feel slow. Last thing is he doesn't run with play quickness and or urgency. So overall, at one point while I was watching his tape, announcers compared his pace to Le'Veon Bell's, and I disagree 100%. His pace nor running style were anything close to Bell's, but I don't exactly have a comparison for him either. So to me, prior to the combine, he probably projected as more of a late round 6 to early round 7 guy, but following the combine where he's top 5 in everything besides the 40 and wasn't a bottom 5 finisher in the 40, I think he probably moved his stock up to a late round 5, early round 6 guy. I think that with the strength he will be able to play as a pass blocking back, and he has potential to play special teams. I saw him make a tackle after his quarterback threw an interception.
I have a comp. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, who?
Fitzgerald Toussaint.
Oh, Fitzgerald Toussaint. That does actually make sense. Because he can play special teams just like Toussaint did.
That's what I was going to say. You said pass protection and special teams, and I was like, that's Toussaint's calling card. That's his entire NFL career right there.
Well, Fitzgerald Toussaint was able to last for a couple of years, so maybe Robinson has a chance to do so as well. I am a fan of running backs that can block. Out of all their abilities, I like pass blocking backs the most. I like guys that are willing to get their body in there and block. But anyway, like I said, I saw him make a tackle after his quarterback threw an interception. So I think it's possible he can contribute there when working with NFL special teams coaches. His speed and level of competition is still a concern, though, so I can't really see him going higher than 5. And there is still a chance he goes undrafted. I am projecting that he will be, and that he could be drafted as high as 5. But to me, he's still like a round 6 prospect, like late round 6. But I think that his combine might have turned some heads. They're like, wow, he actually has a lot better stats than some higher level. He has some better attributes than some high level running backs, and that might keep him in the fold. But yeah, that was James Robinson at Illinois State. And then I watched his games. He was one of the guys, but coming from Illinois State, there wasn't a lot of tape on, so I had to go back to 2018. So I watched versus North Dakota State in 2018. Then I watched versus North Dakota State in 2019, which was the championship game, and then versus Northern Arizona in 2019, along with his highlights.
Oh, I'd like to also point out that he also played pretty well in the Shrine game. I watched the Shrine game. He played well. That was how I first knew about him, was because I watched that game and he stood out. So he probably helped himself there, too.
Oh, really? I had no idea he even played in the Shrine game. Oops. Oh, well. Who is your next prospect?
Okay, so I'm going to be wrapping up with a little bit of a trend breaker, and the guy that follows in the footsteps of another running back that I looked at a few years ago that I liked. So I'm sure you remember Elijah McGuire, the former Ragin' Cajun who was on the Jets for a couple of years. So I'm looking at one of his fellow Ragin' Cajuns in Raymond Calais. I want to say Calais because it's spelled Calais, but it's Calais. He's a senior, and he stands at 5'8" and 188 pounds. He had the third best 40 time from all running backs at the combine, so that was pretty cool to see. A little bit about Calais. He's a former All-State offensive MVP and ran for just under 5,000 yards in his last 2 seasons in high school. Most of his early playing days in college, he was a reserve running back, but a bigger kick returner. He returned 15 as a freshman and had just 23 carries his freshman year. He became the primary kick returner his sophomore season and saw an improved performance. His average yards per return jumped from 21.9 to 24.1, and he scored 2 kick return touchdowns. He played in all 12 games that year and started to see a little action as a runner again. He scored 1 touchdown and had 15 carries. He started to play a little more his junior year. All Sun Belt honorable mention as a returner. Had 754 rushing yards and averaged 25.9 yards per kick return. That was ranked 14th best in the FBS. And then this past year was his breakout year. He was on a first-team All-Sun Belt return man and a third-team All-Sun Belt running back and all-purpose, so he made the third-team All-Sun Belt twice. Started in 7 of the team's 14 games, had 886 rushing yards, had 6 touchdowns, and averaged 28.5 yards per kick return. So his yards per return on kicks improved every single year. So that was pretty interesting to see. He's got a great burst and excellent speed. So, that's something that's probably pretty obvious with a guy that's that small and had that good of a 40 time, but it is true. He's got great acceleration. He can put a lot of pressure on those deep safeties who are trying to catch scat backs flying out of the backfield. He runs like a slasher, so zone blocking schemes are going to be nice for him. And obviously, with the guy that small, perimeter runs are his bread and butter. He's got quick and subtle feet, and he only had 1 fumble in the last 2 seasons, so that's pretty nice to see. And as I mentioned before, he's a slippery runner, and he has obvious special teams potential at the NFL level. Not only was he a kick returner, but he also was a primary gunner for the punt team in 2018, so that's pretty good to see. As far as negatives go, this is pretty big for playing running back these days. he is utterly useless as a receiver and in pass protection. University of Lafayette did not trust him on passing downs at all. He never played in any passing situations. So he has extremely limited upside as a running back itself. And while he is willing to run between tackles, he's not very good at it. Obviously, at only 5'8", he's not really going to last if you pound him between the tackles a lot. He's not as elusive as you'd want. A guy that's, you think about scat back, you'd want them to be more elusive. He's not as elusive because remember how you were talking about, which running back was it that you had mentioned kind of slows down too much when he gets into a one-on-one situation? Who was that?
That was going to be, that was Zach Moss.
So Calais has kind of the opposite. So while slowing down too much is an issue, Calais basically just rushes into the situation sometimes. He doesn't really slow down enough to set up a juke or spin. He'll just run right into it and will get tackled because he's not strong enough to run through tackles. So he needs to be able to set up moves to break tackles, and he just doesn't do that. He rushes into stuff. So while you saw Zach Moss's issues of slowing down too much, here we're on the opposite end of the spectrum where he's not giving himself enough time to do anything. He's just rushing into a tackle. So that's not very good. So overall, Calais reminds me a lot of Elijah McGuire, like I said, a speedy, effective outside runner who can offer a nice dimension to a running game, albeit in a limited fashion. But his non-existent and terrible tape as a pass catcher and pass protector are definitely going to keep him from being an every down back in the NFL. Even if he somehow develops in those areas, his size is going to limit him to being a Darren Sproles type of player at best. Now, with that being said, his special teams value is not something you can deny, and even if he never becomes an offensive regular, he can probably stick in the league for a little while, kind of like Fitzgerald Toussaint, as a returner or gunner. He's probably a mid to late day 3 guy and probably could go undrafted, but I think he'll stick somewhere even if he's on a practice squad. So, Calais, I checked out his games at Georgia Southern and Appalachian State from this past year. Those were the 2 games I was able to see. He didn't play a ton in those games, but again, it's harder to see tape from these small school guys. So those were the 8 running backs we got a chance to look at. So in terms of the 4 guys you saw, tell me who you liked the most and why, and just go down the list in terms of who you liked the most and why.
Sure. So I had J.K. Dobbins at the top. I liked his tape the most. I felt like he was one of the only ones that made sense if the Steelers were to take a running back this year. Like we said, right in the beginning, the 2 that we would say, you said Jonathan Taylor and then J.K. Dobbins. Those are it for me. Those 2 are if you're going to take a running back, if they're not there, if they're not available, you should be taking a running back at pick 49. And it wouldn't even make sense to take a running back after that because there's no one going to be able to come in and help immediately and co-start with James Conner or something. But J.K. Dobbins proved to me that I feel like he could come in and be a co-starter with James Conner. And I liked his tape. I like his toughness, both physical and mental. I think that he would be a solid addition. After J.K. Dobbins, I have James Robinson, mostly because he's a value pick with upside. I liked his strength. I like that he could possibly contribute as a pass blocker and maybe as a special teams player. And he would be if you're taking a running back, this is a guy that you're thinking round 6, round 7, which I still wouldn't be about at that point because the Steelers don't really need a running back. But at least I could see some value in James Robinson. There's some upside. Then the last 2 were tough to rank. I look at it as this way, though. I see them both as 4th-rounders. Who would I rather take if one is there in the 4th round? And that's going to be Edwards-Helaire. I don't trust him as a runner, but he could be like Austin Eckler or Jalen Richard, where he becomes a pass-catching specialist out of the backfield, which if we're talking about replacing someone in the running back room right now, Jalen Samuels is a guy that we opened this podcast talking about, saying that he might not be on the roster next year. His spot isn't secure. And Edwards-Helaire would be your next Jalen Samuels. That could be his floor. It might be a little bit worse than him, but his ceiling could be Austin Eckler or Jalen Richard in my mind. So he could be an improved Jalen Samuels, what the Steelers wanted Jalen Samuels to be. So that's how I look at it. I do think that Me viewing him as a fourth rounder is broken because I don't think other people are. He also offers versatility as a kick return specialist. I forgot to mention that as well over Moss. But I feel like he's going to go in the second round or third round, and I think that's a mistake. I didn't like his tape that much, but with in mind that I think he's a fourth rounder, and if I would take a running back in the fourth round, it leaves Zach Moss last. Unfortunately, with the lack of speed and not super impressive strength to match the greater weight, I just didn't like him that much. Tackling gets better at the NFL level, so guys that rely solely on being bigger at the college level really, really worry me. Plus, the Steelers already have Benny Snell to be the big back at the goal line if they don't want to use James Conner. It's a position that I don't see the Steelers ever even needing to replace because, like, at least with Edwards-Helaire, yeah, Jalen Samuels is replaceable. His roster spot isn't guaranteed. To me, Zach Moss adds nothing that the Steelers already don't have or want to replace. You wouldn't get rid of Benny Snell after one season. That just doesn't make sense, and especially when he flashed. I mean, it's not even like, oh, yeah, Benny Snell came in and he sucked. Like, Benny Snell came in and did pretty solid. Like, Zach Moss just doesn't make sense to the Steelers, so I don't really get why. It was really unfortunate. I was expecting to like him better and how many people were mocking him to the Steelers, but he, to me, is out of all the prospects I looked at, and probably most of your prospects. I feel like out of the 8, he might be number 7 or 8 out of the ones that I'd want to go to the Steelers. Like, it's just that I don't see him fitting with the Steelers at all. I don't see the comparison. But, and not to say that I don't like Zach Moss. I hope he's successful, but I just don't think he fits in the Steelers. How do you rank your prospects?
Alrighty, so first I have Jonathan Taylor. I'll keep it pretty simple. I've already said it. If the Steelers take any running back in this draft, I think it should be Taylor at 49. Best all-around guy that I saw, and he can contribute immediately. Beyond that, I wouldn't want any of these guys, even though I do like what I saw from most of them. Cam Akers, solid runner. There's no big red flags, but I just don't see the point of adding a guy who's going to be a development guy. He's not going to help much until his second or third year, so that's not really helpful. Raymond Calais, the Steelers don't really have a use for this kind of scat back because they already have Kareth White, and even in terms of special teams, they have Trey Edmonds. So unless if you're looking to replace 2 with 1, which I guess I could see, I'd just go with the devil you know instead of the devil you don't know. But that's just me. Last, I have A.J. Dillon. Look, I like him, but he is so redundant. He's basically a duplicate of James Conner from 2017 and Benny Snell in 2019, but probably not as good. At worst, he's just a short yardage back, but even at his best, I just think that taking him screams that you whiffed on Benny Snell, and I think that's a mistake. So that's how I rank those 4 guys. So that concludes kind of our look at running backs right now. There's obviously a ton of news to unpack with the NFL going on right now. Why don't we start with what's going on with the Steelers? And we're not going to do everything at this particular moment because there is just so much. But maybe we could go over some highlights and then we can get into bigger detail when we talk about tackles a couple of days from now.
That's good to me.
Alrighty, so I think the big NFL news is the CBA. It passed by a narrow margin of just 60 votes, I think. So that means that there's going to be a 17 playoff this year, and the 17-game regular season starts next season, and we have CBA peace for 11 years. So even though I would like to see the players get more, it was obviously fantastic news that for the Steelers that it passed.
Yeah, man, I apologize. My Discord is currently breaking, so I apologize if I'm slow to answer things or stuff. But the CBA passing was great for the Steelers and, again, bad for the players, which is unfortunate for the players. But, I mean, these guys need to get paid. At the end of the day, the guys that are at the back end of the roster make up more of the NFL. I am surprised by the vote. I was really confident that it would pass by like 70%. I was a little bit surprised, and if they let players switch their vote, this might have failed. They said that they weren't letting players switch their vote, which was interesting. But I mean, it's passed, and here we are, and now we won't have any delay on football, so I'm happy about it.
To be quite honest with you, I think if they had the chance to change, they would have voted more yes, just because when you consider everything that's happening with the economy because of COVID-19, they would never get a deal this good again. So if you turn this deal down, you're not getting nearly as much money as you previously got. I hear your Discord is having issues again.
Yeah, it's breaking down right at the end, but but granted the vote ended on 2 Saturdays ago, so they wouldn't really have known how bad COVID-19 was yet because this came on fast in the United States.
That's true.
2 weeks ago, I think there was only 10 cases in New York or something like that.
Didn't it go till the 13th or something?
The vote? Oh yeah, it got extended to 13, so maybe they would have known how bad it was.
Because that wasn't this Friday.
Did.
That wasn't this Friday, but it was the previous Friday. And even though it might not have been that bad here, I do know that the economy was starting to not do so well at that point.
So maybe people would have switched votes. It would have been more yes. Yeah.
Well, who knows? But regardless, the Steelers are happy about it because then you can restructure contracts without that 30% rule. And without it, I don't think the Steelers would have been able to keep Bud Dupree, to be honest with you. But now they're able to, and they even had a little room to make some moves. So even though the salary cap is going to be under $200 million, again, I think in part because of that COVID-19 situation, the Steelers were still able to have enough room to not only tag Bud Dupree, which was the big issue we were talking about, but they were able to make some moves too. So you want to talk about some of those moves?
The Steelers moves or NFL news? I missed that part.
The Steelers moves. So, I mean, I guess let's start from a broader sense of not just the restructures, because there were a bunch of those, but also guys that were cut. And I guess we'll start with Ramon Foster, who retired, actually.
Oh, yeah, man. Ramon Foster at the end was talked about being traded as a last-ditch effort, and then about an hour later, he decided to retire and call it quits, which I think was a good decision for him. He had a nice long career. He was a really good Steeler. He really represented what a Steeler was, and it's going to be sad to see him go. I mean, but it was towards the end. It was just a little bit too much money. The Steelers didn't have much money to go with. I am partially glad he retired a Steeler. So he had a long career being an undrafted free agent from Tennessee. So
yeah, absolutely a great career for someone that was an afterthought coming out of the 2009 draft. Started in, I think, 145 out of 162 games. So he was a huge part of those teams over the past decade. Went about his business and really was a professional type of player, was the player rep, and a guy that just, it's so hard not to root for a guy like that. And it's unfortunate he never got a chance to win a Super Bowl, but obviously very happy with the way he performed and wish him the best of luck in retirement. So, but it was clearly the end for him. His last season was just not very good. So now the Steelers had holes at starting left guard, and his reserve, B.J. Finney, went and signed with the Seahawks. So the Steelers were down a couple players there. Beyond that, they released 3 players, Anthony Chickillo, Mark Barron, and Johnny Holton, to free up more cap space for tagging Bud Dupree. And they also restructured Marquise Pouncey, Ben Roethlisberger, Vance McDonald, Joe Hayden, and Chris Boswell, among other players, to get some more room for other potential deals. So any thoughts on those cuts and restructures?
I know it's kind of mean because I have nothing personally against the guy, but seeing Johnny Holton cut for no reason kind of made me smile on the inside. Because there was no reason to cut Johnny Holton now. I was not expecting it. It was just, it doesn't help the Steelers anyway. It saves them a very minimal amount of money, but they decided to do it anyway. And part of me was like, yeah, that. Remember that next time you want a wide receiver that's useless. Just, I don't know. And part of me smiled on the inside. I feel bad because I shouldn't have anything against Johnny Holton. I'm just still mad that the Steelers decided to cut Tazar Skipper for him. And even though they got Tazar Skipper back, the legend of Johnny Holton, the Hall of Fame wide receiver, it never died in my head. I have no idea why they cut Holton so early. They could have easily taken him to camp, but it made me laugh. The other two were expected. You can't afford Anthony Chickillo and Mark Barron, just especially for their play. Anthony Chickillo doesn't do enough, and Mark Barron just wasn't very good for his $6 million contract, so he had to move on. But I do hope for them to catch on somewhere else. Anthony Chickillo could be a Patriot. The Patriots had interested in last year, so I could see him returning there, especially with them losing a linebacker or two. I know they lost Landon Roberts and Kyle Vanoy, so he could end up there. Even though that's just speculation, there's no meetings that I've heard of yet. But yeah, I hope the best for them.
Man, Tyler Matakevich, another former Steeler who left and signed elsewhere, he's making more money over the next 2 years than Chicolo was going to make on his contract with the Steelers. Isn't that wild? And Chicolo, for all we've ripped on him, he can at least play some defense. Matakevich cannot.
I guess the Bills probably paid him because he had played some defense, like just played, like not that he was effective on it. The fact that he played some defense that, and then also was a good special teamer.
What else? The Steelers, we finally got comp pick news. That took forever. I felt like we got it so much earlier last season, but the Steelers did get a third-round compensatory pick, number 102, for losing guys like Le'Veon Bell last season. So the Steelers get that much-needed extra day 2 pick, so that'll come in handy.
Man, that's expected, and that was good. I mean, I would have been really sad if we ended up with like a 4th-round pick instead. Like that would have hurt everyone's feelings quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other players that left that we are forgetting before we get to the guys the Steelers acquired?
We talk about BJ Finney.
I had mentioned him, but we didn't get a chance to expand on it. So BJ Finney was a free agent, and apparently the Seahawks outbid the Steelers for him. I guess the Steelers set a number that they valued him at, and the Seahawks outbid for him. I think it was something like $4.5 million. So clearly, as I said before, that Rams game was really telling last year, where they just didn't seem to think highly enough of BJ Finney because they moved Filer to left guard and then benched him for whatever reason. They didn't trust him, and I always thought Finney played really well whenever he had to, but I guess the team didn't necessarily agree. It felt like he fell out of favor that last year.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I mean, the Steelers did offer him an extension still. It just wasn't enough. Probably only $3 million compared to what the Seahawks offered at, like, what was it, 4.5 or 4?
It was between 4 and 5. I know that.
Yeah.
I guess they just never saw him as more than just a backup, which is a shame because he was a lifelong Steeler. Steeler fan. I'll never forget the reaction he and his family had when he found out that the Steelers signed him on as a UDFA. So I wish him nothing but the best. Never forget the game we saw in Buffalo, Le'Veon Bell's record-breaking rushing day. Finney started that game.
I forgot about that, but yeah, he did a lot for the team. I felt like, what was the record? He started 11 games or 13 games by the end of this year now.
Yeah, I think it's something like he's had to do like somewhere between 2 and 4 or 5 every year that he's been with the team.
And the Steelers were, I believe, when they got to 11 games with him starting, they were 10-1. So he 10-1 when BJ Finney started. So elite guard, possibly, probably not, and more like coincidence. But when he started, the team did just as well, it felt like. So, I mean, I wish him luck with Seattle. There's a good chance that he could become a starter there.
Indeed.
And unlock his potential. But on the other hand, he has to see the Rams twice a year, which, that might be rough.
Only time will tell, but obviously wishing him the best of luck. And then it's time to talk about the guys the Steelers have acquired. So, obviously the Steelers we know about their big holes at tight end, now interior offensive line. And with Javon Hargrave, that was the guy we missed. Javon Hargrave signing with the Eagles for 3 years, $39 million. Big contract, obviously well-deserved, and voiding a huge hole at defensive tackle.
Can't believe we forgot about that one. Honestly, the Eagles love their defensive lineman. He gets to stay in Pennsylvania, just moves to the other side. It was well deserved. He was the highest paid nose tackle for about a day, and then the Bengals decided to sign. I forget his name already, but the Bengals made someone else the highest paid.
You're telling me the Bengals paid somebody? I know, I was as shocked as everyone probably was.
Yeah, dude, and it wasn't like Josh Hart or not Josh Hart, Bobby Hart or B.W. Webb this offseason.
Can we talk about how Eric Flowers is making more than Bobby Hart, and Bobby Hart's twice the player that Eric Flowers is?
Dude, it's insane.
And like
Bobby Hart
he's terrible. We've ripped on him so much, and he's still so much better than Eric Flowers.
I have no idea how I don't know what Eric Flowers has on some people. Apparently, people are bidding on Eric Flowers, but some incredible stuff, man. He has some things on some teams that they don't want to get released.
You know what it is? It's that former first-round pick pedigree. Maybe our system will work for him. It's the whole... I mean, I guess that's not a good comparison. I'll just forget about that.
Fair. But anyway, good luck to Javon Hargrave. I really wish him the best. I knew that he didn't belong to the Steelers. And I think he could be up to like a 10-sack guy if he's a full-time starter with Philadelphia. I think that...
It's great, though, because we get to play him this year.
Do get to play him, which kind of sucks.
Can't wait. That's going to be tons of fun. Tons of fun. Oh, two other guys that left, since we're talking about that 2016 draft class. Excuse me, coughing to your elbow there, guys. The Steelers' 2016 draft, the entire class is gone, so... a few days ago, Sean Davis signed, what was it, a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Redskins?
Yeah, it was 1 year, $5 million. He gets to go home. He was a Washington native.
I thought that was about double as much as I would have offered him for the Steelers. Because remember, I was talking about I wouldn't have minded seeing him come back just because I knew if he left, the safety room would be non-existent in terms of depth. But that's a little too rich for a guy that's was on the way out.
Yeah, man. I'm just happy for the comp pick. I've never seen the Steelers have this many guys. Almost all of their possible unrestricted free agents got signed. The only one that didn't get signed is L.T. Walton, and he's probably not going to be. But regardless, I am so happy comp picks-wise for next year. The Steelers have some trading ammo
even
going into this year.
Even if Walton does get picked up, it's probably not going to be enough to warrant a comp pick anyways, so...
Oh, yeah. Artie Burns probably is going to factor into it.
And speaking of Artie Burns, he just signed with the Bears, today? Or last night? It was late last night, I think. It might have been this morning.
He signed with them yesterday.
It was yesterday. But another 1-year deal. Did you see how much it was for? I didn't see details.
It wasn't released yet. I've been waiting. I've been keep checking the Bears Twitter account and stuff because I want to see if it qualifies for a comp pick. Probably not. But no. At the moment, we don't actually know what he was signed for.
So obviously the best of luck to all three of those guys. Man, in 2016, all three of those guys were playing legit defensive snaps, and they all looked pretty good, and how quickly things changed. I mean, Hargrave played really well. He just priced himself out. But Davis and Burns, obviously, their high points came in their first 2 years, and then it was all downhill from there. So, but best of luck to all three of those guys. I mean, they, obviously hoping for the best for them. Especially,
but despite everything I made fun of, like with Artie Burns,
especially Artie Burns,
I'm really wishing for the best for him.
Yeah, especially for him.
His story is so sad and stuff, and all the stuff he has to do. He had to grow up quick. He probably had to declare for the draft earlier than he was ready because he needed money more than anything, and that might have hurt him. And I hope that with the Bears, he becomes the cornerback we saw in probably his
2017
rookie year, where he was, or 2017, yeah. 2017 is probably better. I hope he's something great. I really do. I know it didn't work with the Steelers, but I want it to work out with the Bears.
Yeah, he like Sean Davis, I believe, just needed a fresh start, and hopefully that's what he ends up needing to succeed. But in any case, with those moves, the Steelers have some holes, and Kevin Colbert doesn't like to go into the draft with obvious holes. So where do you want to start?
Let's talk about what they did at guard.
Okay, so
I like that.
That first move they brought in Wisniewski. What's his name? Steven
Wisniewski.
That's right, the guard who was starting for the Chiefs in Super Bowl 54 just a little over a month ago. A two-time Super Bowl champion. He was on the Eagles team that won Super Bowl 52, so he's won 2 rings in the past 3 years, so that's pretty impressive. A guy that's been around the league, has played guard and center. He was a backup last year, but ended up starting late in the year due to injury and stayed in the starting lineup. Solid depth addition. A guy that not flashy, just like the Steelers guards typically are, but gets the job done. And at a relatively affordable price as well. And when you consider the move being made, do you think that, first of all, I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen. Is he going to be the next B.J. Finney, or is he going to be starting? And then after that, tell me what you want. Do you want him to be the starter, or do you want Filer and or Okorafor to move to left guard?
I personally love this signing. I think it's great. He's a player that played really well in the playoffs down the stretch, and that's important to me. He's played well in the past, and he was for a very cheap deal, so cheap that it doesn't factor into the comp pick formula. So signing him didn't even hurt in that regard. So I love that deal. I think for now he actually is going to be the starter at left guard. We'll have to see in the draft because just because signing a player does not mean that Colbert won't take one in the draft early. It could be preparing just to fill the hole. Like you saw how they signed Mark Barron, and then a few months later they drafted Devin Bush. It's just like sometimes it's like it's a temporary thing, you know. So
Yeah.
I think that he's going to be the starter, and there could be an interior O line brought in to possibly replace him, like picked in the second round. But for now, I think he actually is going to be the starter going into the season.
I tend to agree with you right now, but obviously things can change. Let's move on to the second move. You want to talk about Wormley, or do you want to talk about Ebron?
I want to talk about Wormley because I find that one to be bizarre, but I still like it.
Okay, so a rare move made between division rivals. The Steelers send a fifth-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens in exchange for the Ravens' 2021 seventh-round pick and defensive lineman Chris Wormley, who has 1 year left on his deal. Someone that's going to help bolster the depth at the defensive line position. What do you think about it?
I loved it. I thought it was really good. I mean, Chris Wormley's definitely not a pass rusher. He's just a run stopper, but that's what you need in this division with Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon. All these guys that are running, you need a guy that's good against the run, and you need the depth there. Losing Javon Hargrave, it made it less of a hole down the middle. I mean, the Steelers' defensive line was still fine regardless. And I really like the compensation. I really like that it's not even a trade down in this draft. It's a trade down in next year's draft. They get a 2021 fifth, and we still get a 2021 seventh. And then when you take into account the comp picks that we're probably getting in 2021, that hardly even matters. It doesn't even matter. And we already have an extra seventh-round pick in 2021 from Gerald Hawkins. So I love the trade. I thought it was great. I felt like it answered the question. I do wish there was more years on his contract, but if there was another year on his contract, it probably would have been more expensive to make that trade. But it was really weird to see it between a divisional rival. But I also like the idea of trading for a divisional rival's player, because when you're getting the player, it just means that they're going to play more pissed off 2 games a year. They're going to play like, hey, yeah, you got rid of me. This is what it's going to be like now. So I like getting the player in that kind of trade, not trading away the player. But yeah, so I was happy with that.
And I mean, on top of that, how much is he really going to command on the open market? He started 15 games out of a possible 39. He has just 2.5 sacks in his career. Unless if he has a breakout season, which wouldn't happen due to injury most likely, you could probably retain him.
Yeah, so if he gets an extension, even better. I would love that. He's only making $2 million this year, so I mean, if the Steelers could get him for like a 2-year, $4 million contract again, I'd take that.
And you know, we all knew that replacing Javon Hargrave, the big thing was getting Stephon Tuitt back healthy, having those 2 guys healthy, because then Hargrave is only playing like not even 40% of the snaps. So you're talking about replacing that amount of snaps, and you knew it wasn't going to be a caliber of player like Hargrave. It was going to have to be supplemental. More Tyson Alualu, now some Chris Wormley, and you want a boost from a guy like Isaiah Buggs in his second year, and a little bit of Daniel McCullers sprinkled in here and there. We knew that that's what it was going to have to be, so adding in an extra name to keep the rotation going, I think that helps bolster it, and I think that that's a classic Kevin Colbert move, and I liked it as well.
Man, pretty good move. So let's get to the last one.
So Eric Ebron, you're talking about the tight end. I know you weren't crazy about this one, and of course, with my roommate Will being a Lions fan, was not a big fan of Eric Ebron back in the day. I'm kind of indifferent about it. I'm not a big Eric Ebron fan, but I think that it was pretty cheap, and because of that, just 2 years, $12 million, and because of that, and because there's not really anything else that's significant on the open market and the weak tight end draft class that everyone's talking about, I understand this move and I can live with it.
It's grown on me. I didn't like it originally. I didn't like the idea of signing a big name tight end. I didn't like spending that much money on the market. But, I mean, comparatively, you look at, like, Tyler Kroft. Right now, the Steelers could have Tyler Kroft for $6 million. Instead, they have Eric Ebron for $6 million. So, you know, it could be worse. And it wasn't that expensive of a deal. I know that Ebron had his best season back in 2018 when Andrew Luck was playing. And then he regressed again last year a little bit. And then with the Lions, he was terrible. He dropped everything. He didn't have as many dropped passes last year. I think only 5, and 3 were against the Raiders, weirdly. And then 1 against the Patriots, and the other one I can't remember where it was. But I guess it's all right. You know what he helps with? He is a great middle-of-the-field target. And where the Steelers struggled last year when Ben Roethlisberger didn't play is they couldn't target anywhere in the middle of the field at all. And that is a lot on the tight ends and the quarterbacks. So, you know what? I hope Eric Ebron improves that. And overall, it's not the worst deal in the world. The Steelers have done way worse things in the past, but getting Ebron wasn't terrible. I hope it works out.
And see, the big thing that you mentioned there, being able to separate in the middle of the field, Vance McDonald is not a guy that's going to get a ton of separation, which is partially why he wasn't looked at near the middle of the field. Teams were clogging the middle of the field and were daring the Steelers quarterbacks to throw outside because, well, in Devlin Hodges' case, he didn't have the arm strength, and in Mason Rudolph's case, he just didn't have the confidence after that whole Myles Garrett situation. So I think adding this guy, it's a big, tall, basically just a big receiver. And I think with Ben Roethlisberger back, that'll help open things up in the middle. And that should help Vance McDonald improve too. And now you can run natural 2 tight end sets, which is something that the Steelers were basically forcing with Zach Banner because they just didn't trust their extra tight ends. Nick Vannett was not very good, and McDonald suffered too as well because of it. So this allows you to run actual 2 tight end sets. He's not going to be a good blocker. That much is for sure. Again, I don't love it, but it's cheap. It's only a 2-year deal. And it's just like you mentioned with Mark Barron last year, it's covering yourself in the case that you can't get someone early that you want. So I can definitely live with that.
Speaking of Vannett, he also went to the Broncos. I don't think we mentioned that. Vannett signed a 2-year deal with the Broncos. It was a pretty cheap deal. I think it was $4 million total. But
yeah, he was not very good last year, and I still maintain that getting Luke Wilson for just a veteran minimum would have been better than Vannett. Not better, but a better value, because even though Vannett was a better player, you wouldn't have had to give up a 5th-round pick for Luke Wilson.
Yeah, trading a 5th-round pick was definitely one of Colbert's mistakes, but it wasn't a big mistake. I mean, you look at it, it just was a mistake.
Any other Steelers news to talk about right now?
I don't believe so.
All right, we're running over 2 hours here, so I'll let you pick because there's so much NFL stuff to talk about. We'll talk about most of it next time, but I'll let you pick 2 things that we can address quickly here before we head out.
Let's talk about the Texans trade.
Alrighty, because that was awful for the Texans anyways. Bill O'Brien has lost his mind, except wait, he already did before. He's just not good at what he does.
Oh, yeah. So a week after the Panthers made their terrible trade, and I thought it was going to be like one of the worst of the season, the Texans may have somehow topped it. The Texans sent star wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins and a 4th-round pick to the Cardinals for running back David Johnson, a 2nd-round pick, and a 2021 4th-round pick.
That's awful. Oh, that's awful.
Imagine starting your day with DeAndre Hopkins, not having a 1st-round pick, then ending your day without DeAndre Hopkins in a trade and still not having a 1st-round pick. I have no idea how the Cardinals were able to sell David Johnson's contract and say, yeah, he's still good. Remember what he did in, 2016? Do you remember? Do you remember what he did? Just ignore what he did in, 2019, 2018. Ignore his contract that you're about to take on. Just give us DeAndre Hopkins, and, it will be a steal. We'll give you a 2nd-round pick to even it out. And you know what? You can give us a 4th, and we'll give you a 4th back in 2021. Sound good? All right, cool, great. Let's go. And then somehow Bill O'Brien was like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, let's do it. I have no idea how the Texans are operating like this.
If it wasn't evident before that they need an actual general manager, it's beyond evident right now. As he is, man, Deshaun Watson, that poor kid, he's got to be like just shaking his head. I know that he'd probably get tagged, but I'd be saying, nope, I am not. As soon as my rookie contract is up, I'm not playing for you again.
It's just incredible, man. I don't know how they're that bad at what they do. I don't understand how you could be that bad.
The trade is so bad that when you propose it in Madden, it gets denied.
Oh yeah, and it's not even close. It's not even close. I think you could offer the rest of the Cardinals draft picks, other like starting from second round on. I still think it doesn't accept it.
If you add like a 2021 first round pick for the Cardinals onto that, that makes it more of a fair deal.
Yeah, dude.
But
and it still might not even be great.
It's still so You're talking right now about, first of all, running backs that are, he's over the hill. He was last good 3-4 years ago. And did I mention he's a running back for one of the top 3 receivers in the game? I just don't see how you can think that makes any sense. I mean, it's honestly just, it's like dereliction of duty. That's how bad it is.
Dude, it's just absolutely terrible, man.
I just don't even know how to describe it other than that. I mean, he should have been fired for the way the team imploded in the playoffs earlier this year, but he should definitely be on the hot seat for how David Johnson performs this year. I mean, honestly, DeAndre Hopkins could have a season-ending surgery in the preseason, and David Johnson could break the NFL record for rushing yards this year, and it still would not change my mind.
Honestly, it's just still a terrible trade, just all in all. Just there's nothing you can do to really like make it seem better, because it's just not. It's just bad.
Just crazy. One more thing you want to talk about real quick.
So let's make it the Baltimore Ravens first trade, because I feel like that was interesting. They made 2 big trades.
Oh, the Calais Campbell one?
They traded a 5th-round pick to the Jaguars for Calais Campbell, which that 5th-round pick isn't going to be theirs, and it's not going to be the Vikings either. It's going to be the Falcons pick, which we'll talk about that trade next time. But they got another pick from another trade they did, and you just hate to see it, honestly. It's just the Jaguars didn't have cap space to hold on to all these guys, and then the Baltimore Ravens were able to get such a great pass rusher. And this is why Chris Wormley became expendable. They had the depth now at defensive line, so they had a great starter and they had the backup. So Chris Wormley was just kind of there. So I mean, good for them, but like that sucks. It sucks for the AFC North that I love Calais Campbell, so it sucks that he's coming here.
Are they going to be trading Matthew Judon now?
Possibly. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to get the value. I don't know if Judon's going to play for them, though. Judon really didn't want to be there.
Well, we'll have to monitor that as time goes on. Any closing thoughts here?
No.
Alrighty then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to email the show at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. And check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for bearing with us through this long episode. We hope you are all staying safe amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Wash your hands, practice good hygiene, don't go out in large groups, and as always, be safe. And thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Have a terrific day.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.